Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Hoeflinger podcast. I'm here with my dad, who a lot of you may know from social media, Dr. Brian Hoeflinger. How you doing today, Dad?
I'm awesome. How you doing, Kevin? It's my son, Kevin, by the way. You guys probably know him too.
I'm doing pretty good today. It's
Yeah.
it's Monday, shooting the first episode. So while we're doing this, over the last year since we started doing social media with my dad, a lot of people have constantly requested that we do a podcast or he does a
Yeah.
podcast, and it's something even a couple of years ago we used to discuss doing just to discuss ideas. So what you can expect is he's a full-time neurosurgeon. We'll talk a lot about neurosurgery and medicine. He's got a lot of subject matter expertise there. We also are very passionate about fitness, healthy living, and other like, causes that are pretty meaningful to us,
Mhm.
including drunk driving. Um, but yeah, anything else you want to add there?
No, I mean, a lot of people have been requesting this. We've been putting it off for a long time. And, we're going to make it low key, informative, try to make it a little bit fun. And let's get going.
Yeah, so bear with us. This is our very first time. We're going to try to consistently improve over time. But we also, any suggestions you guys have on any of the social medias, please comment. Let us know anything we could do better or any topics you'd like us to explore. But yeah,
Um,
so I'll go ahead.
no, I think one of the first things that we've been asked the most about probably is, why have we started into social media? I think that'd be a good topic to start off with.
Yeah, so I think today a good beginning episode. What we wanted to talk about is why we started social media. Just and a kind of a life story of my dad. He's been on a couple podcasts, but I know him pretty intimately as his son, and I think going over that would be interesting to a lot of people. Your life
Sure.
story of why you became a neurosurgeon. Um, so yeah, why we started on social media. Why don't you kick it off with why when you created your patient videos all
Yeah.
those years ago?
So when someone comes in to see you for surgery, and you talk to them in the office, they have a lot of questions. You go over their films with them, you talk to them about surgery, but I think by the time they leave, a lot of that is forgotten when you leave the office because you're nervous during a visit. You may not be you might be thinking other things like, what am I do with my dogs or my work, and how am I going to take off work? So a lot of people, when I would go to surgery with them and I'd meet them right before surgery, I'd ask them any questions, and they'd have a lot of questions because they didn't remember what I had told them in the office. So I thought it'd be wise to create this video where it kind of recreates your office visit, right? So when you come in for a visit to see me and we start talking about surgery, I'll kind of have a video that recreates that office visit. We talk about what your MRI may have looked up like in the office, and I'll talk about your specific surgery, go over all the details again like we did in the office. And then I talk about all the aftercare and what to do at home, how to change your bandage, what activities you can do. And that's all wrapped up into one 13-minute video for most of my videos. And it covers most of my surgeries that I do. So when I started doing that, I found that people didn't have questions anymore. They were very comfortable. People were watching it like crazy, and they really liked the videos. And so Kevin had observed that, and Kevin's graduated from Fisher Business School at Ohio State and had a kind of business mindset. And we were thinking, this might be a good idea to do for other surgeons and have other surgeons start making videos. But then even beyond that, I think he had an idea because people like the videos so much and they like learning about neurosurgery that I'll let him tell you about the next part.
Yeah, so I started doing it for surgeons around the Toledo area. We have multiple orthopedic surgeons and neurosurgeons, a cardiologist, and some others. But then the other year, I was just actually last June is when we started on
Mm-hmm.
social media. I mean, as a younger person, I'm 25. I see all these other things on social media, and I wasn't really on TikTok, but I was on Instagram and YouTube. I would see all those videos, and I was thinking, you've got a lot of interesting stuff, and we had all the video content that we've already shot. So I just was thinking, let's just start there and then go from it. So we created the TikTok, and relatively quickly
Yeah,
we
I
kind of
bet you
blew
within the
up.
first month or so, we had almost 100,000 followers. It was crazy.
Yeah, so we just started on TikTok, but then I started seeing it, putting content and growing some other social channels, so like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we just slowly went from there. And we just wanted to be. We started out with just neurosurgery more so, and we wanted to add in more stuff about our other interests like
Yeah.
health, and then stuff involving Brian Matters, which is the organization our family started for my brother who died over 10 years ago. But we slowly kind of added other stuff where like we have this platform we wanted to spread positivity and we wanted to spread good information, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think we wanted to try to make it very meaningful. Our TikTok, some of them are fun, but a lot of them are pretty serious. And I think, we like to talk about meaningful topics that make a difference in people's lives. And I think the thousands and thousands and thousands of comments we got from people indicate that people like to listen to what we had to say. So we've kind of moved on from there, and we've been doing well on social media. Don't put out as much as we probably should, but we try to
We're
we
trying
we
to
try
grow on that.
we try not to put out frivolous stuff, just stuff that we think is really good content for people who watch us.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing. I think some people would assume you can't just put serious stuff or other things like that. People won't listen. But the most viewed TikTok, it's got almost 20 million views, is about, in a creative way, you discussing how alcohol is metabolized in the body. So
Yeah,
if you get creative in different ways, it's not just dancing or silly stuff. You can really do stuff that makes an impact. And I think that's what we try to do. It's hard to come up with creative ways like that sometimes, but we're constantly working on that, and much more to come, hopefully.
yeah.
But yeah, let's. So I wanted to dive in. That's the social media journey. I wanted to dive in and just kind of go through your life story a bit. For all these people that follow you, there's a lot they don't know of your life. So just I guess we can, if you want to talk about your early life at all through high school.
How many minutes do you want me to talk?
Well, no, I'm saying let's just give a quick overview about what your early life was like, just childhood. You had a pretty normal childhood.
Yeah, I mean, we were just my parents. We just had like a average, I'd say, a small house in an average neighborhood, and my parents. I only have fond memories of my parents. They were loving parents, and they took care of us. And um, you know, at an early age, it's different than it is nowadays. Like if you wanted to make money back then, I didn't have any way of getting money from our parents. We get a few dollars for allowance, but I had to paper out from what was it, fourth grade to seventh grade. I'd deliver the papers every day and make $60 a month, and I do creative things like shoveling snow in the winter, or I had I detail cars, and so things like that. So I did a lot of kind of creative stuff to make money when I was younger, because that's what I needed to do. And when I wanted a bike, I bought my own bike, and then I was into sports a lot in high school, and then our family had moved down to Florida when I was in ninth grade, and we were down there for 2 or 3 years, and then my family moved back to Ohio, and I stayed in Florida with my grandparents because I had a job down there at a gas station, was finishing up high school, had a girlfriend, and I didn't want to move back. So they said it was fine if I stayed with my grandparents. So, um, I just graduated high school, and I was getting ready to start college at the University of South Florida to go in marine biology, because I really wanted to go into marine biology. I love the water and love scuba diving. And I got a call from my mom. It was early summer. I just graduated high school, and my brother Eric, who was 3 years older than me, he was 21 at the time. He was in a bad car accident, and my mom said, "You need to come back home. He's been to surgery in the middle of the night on his brain, and he's in a coma." So I flew back to Toledo. First time I ever flew on a plane. I was 18 years old, and went to the ICU at the hospital where my brother was, and he was in intensive care unit. And I first saw him, his didn't look like my brother. I mean, he's grotesquely, his face is all swollen. His head was wrapped with a monitor, a metal tube coming out of his brain. He had two tubes in his chest, a tube in his abdomen, and so they thought he was going to die. He had brain surgery the night before, and then the neurosurgeon who came around, he said he's probably not going to survive, but we're going to do our best. And just hanging around that environment for a couple weeks, just waiting for the neurosurgeon to come around and talk to us, and seeing that environment, I got very interested in neurosurgery. And so ultimately, after 2 weeks, I flew back to Florida, and I dropped out of my classes at the University of South Florida and decided to move home, go to college, and become a neurosurgeon. And so that's why I became a neurosurgeon, just because of my brother's accident. And my brother did survive. He was in a coma for 6 months, and then he could never talk again, but he could kind of mouth words, and he was paralyzed on his right side of his body, so he was never could take care of himself anymore.
Wait, to jump in here, yeah,
Yeah.
my memories
Well, yeah, you
always
remember.
my uncle Eric. I was all he was. He was the life of a party. He made one bad decision. He was a very social guy. He made a bad decision, and I mean, I think the times were a lot different there with people driving drunk.
Well, but it wasn't even. It was a. I think both
They got hit
we
by
know, yeah, he got
yeah.
hit by a drunk driver, and it was just a bad accident, you know.
Yeah. And I think what I remember of him, and he died a couple years after Brian, so like about 8 years ago.
Yeah,
But what I remember is he had a keyboard, he had like a cardboard box keyboard thing, and he could point out words, but that he
yeah,
was always in a wheelchair, and
yeah. He
um,
couldn't talk, you know. He had to point out the words, and he got a machine once that was trying to speak for him, but it never worked very well. So he would just, it was very frustrating for him, you know.
yeah. So
So
and
no life. I mean, he didn't have much of a life after that,
yeah,
obviously.
so I mean, I think that shaped kind of
Yeah,
some things for you later, and we can dive into that later. But of how with
yeah.
medicine and your
So then I
thoughts.
was so I followed through. You know, I went to college in pre med, and then I got into medical school here in Toledo. And I was in my second year of medical school. And my mom loved to write letters to people, and she's always writing every morning. And one morning I gotten up, and she couldn't use her right hand hardly at all. And I asked her how long was that going on for, and she said, you know, a few days she's been having trouble, but she didn't tell anybody. So I called the neurosurgeon who had operated on my brother. He was a neurosurgeon where I was going to medical school, and I told him about it. And he had my mom come in and did a CAT scan of her brain, and she had like 7 tumors in her brain, and so it was cancer. So, you know, she underwent 2 brain surgeries, radiation and chemotherapy. All her hair fell out. I remember her vomiting every morning. And then, you know, it's from the day she was diagnosed to 3 months later with all of that, she ended up dying anyways. And that's kind of where I learned that, you know, more is not always better. And sometimes you have to think more of the patient quality of life than your own quality of life. But that's when it solidified. I definitely knew I needed to be a neurosurgeon at that point. And so my mom, you know, that was just really hard thing to go through. And
You were 25, right?
yeah, about 25. And you know, my mom used to take care of my brother. She kept him out of a nursing home, so she took care of him. That was what she devoted the rest of her life to. And then when my mom died, then my grandmother started taking care of Eric. And ultimately, when my grandmother died, my dad spent the rest of his life taking care of Eric. But you know, I finished up medical school, and then I met Cindy um, just before the last year. Well, I met my wife Cindy in between first and second year of medical school, but really started dating her a little bit after that. And my mom only met her like 3 times before she died. So, so Cindy had said, you know, we were done with medical school and we're doing the match. And, you know, you have to decide what field you want to go into. And she wanted to go into pathology, and I was going into neurosurgery. And we were trying to do the couples match. And
This is for residency
for
program
residency,
for
yeah.
people that don't know.
Yeah, and it's harder to get in there. Neurosurgery was a little bit harder at that point. So we were going to more likely go to a program that accepted me. And I remember she said, you know, I'm not going anywhere with you unless we're married.
Mhm.
So we ended up getting married, and then we ended up getting a couples match at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York. And then she did her pathology residency, which was 5 years, and I did my neurosurgery residency, which was 7 years. And then after, you know, during residency, we had 3 children. We had Brian, Kevin, and Julie, and that was a busy time in our lives because I was never home. And you know, Cindy had her own residency to do, plus she'd take care of all the kids and get them to daycare and go to residency and do her job, and then come home and take care of the kids. And I sometimes wouldn't get home till 8 or 9 o'clock at night if I got home. And so I don't know how we did it through those years, but we did. And then we
Well, just give a tip because I've heard you say it before, but it's pretty crazy. You guys, like, I remember you saying to me one time, you guys would meet. The only time you could meet in the day was in the cafeteria for lunch
or dinner,
or
like, yeah, our
dinner.
dinners together. Like, she would come over to the hospital sometime before, you know, before the kids came home from daycare. She would come early, and we'd have dinner together in the cafeteria, and then she'd go get the kids, and then I wouldn't see her until sometimes the next day. But that was routine. It was just busy. We were both very busy, had busy residencies, and but we found time. If we had a weekend off, you know, we'd take the kids maybe hiking somewhere up an hour away or something. Um, so yeah, and then we ended up moving back to Toledo because that's where our families were. That's where my dad still was, and her parents were still here, and so we came back, and we had Christy 2 years later, our fourth child. And I got into practice and got real busy starting out. And then, you know, my dad, it's funny, I just get home because I never saw my dad much during residency because we were so busy. And then I just get home and I become a neurosurgeon and have a good practice and start making a little bit of money. And then my dad, he got sick, and then he died, I think like after 2 years. Well, 2 years after I got home, he died in 2001. and so I never really had a chance to do anything with my dad or travel with him. I thought we'd always, when I became a nurse, would be able to do things and take him on trips and stuff like that, and just never got the chance to do it. So you definitely have to enjoy your time with your parents while you can, because sometimes it doesn't end up being there. And then, Cindy's dad ended up dying shortly after that, and then
Yeah, but also with mom at that time, my mom had been working too right up until Christy was born, and
yeah,
then you guys made the decision together that you didn't want all of us to just be raised by
yeah, we had
babysitters.
a nanny for a while. We don't want the kids to be raised by a nanny, so we decided to to have Cindy retire, and then she took care of the kids, and so that was a great
Because
decision for
mom,
her.
yeah, it's too like a lot of people since I've grown up, and a lot of people won't know that about my mom, but my mom, he's an MD. My mom's actually an MD PhD.
Yeah,
We got to get her on. We'll get her
she
to
does.
tell some stories. She's a path. She got very interesting
She's a
stories.
forensic pathologist. She's kind of like CSI, just what you watch on TV. CSI, that's what she used to do.
Yeah,
So
so she
she
had,
has a lot of good stories.
but yeah, so she, but I'm always eternally grateful. She decided she took it up and she raised us, and she was an excellent mom. She's always provided us with so much love and support and helped us with so much stuff. So shout out to you, Cindy. I love you. um, so yeah, what do you think about? And I can recount some stuff too, like but childhood. I think it's a lot different now with your work compared to when you were
Yeah.
really in the grind of it when you were starting out in your career and when we were
Well, it's
young.
interesting too, because I always say how busy I was, but I was in my, you're kind of in your own world a little bit when you're that busy. But what would you think, like,
Yeah,
about me
so
not being home? I
well, I
don't
just
know.
know with a lot of stuff, and obviously you're working and you're doing hard stuff. You had a lot of medical school debt and stuff like that because you guys both had to take on a lot of debt to go through stuff, and so you were trying to establish yourself in Toledo, I would imagine. But yeah, I remember when I was a kid, mom would come to everything, but like sporting events and other like school events, a lot of stuff like that. I mean, I think you made them when you could, but I remember you had to miss a lot of those. I remember we never had, if we had dinners as a family together, we would have them. You were at work usually from like 5 to like 7. I feel like a lot of
Yeah, I
days.
did get home at 7 or 8 sometimes. Yeah.
But I mean, you were on trauma call and everything at that time. That's the time if we were doing stuff back then, you had would anything.
What, some good stories to tell?
Well, yeah, because I mean, you were doing
Yeah.
all this stuff. I mean, you're doing that again now. You're starting back up, but you were doing a lot more brain surgery back then, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, so when you do trauma call, I do probably a lot more brain surgery than normal, and then later years I've been doing more spine surgery, and now I'm back into trauma again, so I'm seeing more injuries, more brain injuries
And for
again.
people who don't know, maybe like so, let's go through trauma call versus non-trauma call and different stuff. So you have your routine practice. You're seeing new patients who might come in with back pain or other pain.
Right,
So a lot of time you're doing a spine surgery. So
right.
then neck or spine. But then you rotate with your partners through non-trauma call, which is any of you have done surgery,
Yeah,
right?
so you have the difference between, so our regular call would just be, practice call. So if you do surgery on a patient and they call the office to say they're having increased back pain or they're having drainage from their incision, then you have to have somebody on call in your practice who can take that call, help them, have them come into the office, take a look at them, and things like that. So that's one call. And then there's trauma call, where you're on call for the hospital. So if somebody gets in a car accident and has a head injury or breaks their back or something, or comes in with a brain tumor, then you're on call to see them and take care of them. So it's just two different
Yeah, and
types of call.
I mean
Right.
that's the stressful one. The
Right.
trauma are obviously they're both stress, but the trauma call is much more stressful, and that's. I mean, I can remember my entire life when you get your pager goes off, the beep beep beep, or you had to go wake up in the middle of the night and go in and do a life saving surgery. So, I think that's definitely got to be one of the harder parts of your job. I think.
It is, that's the most stressful part, but I mean, any surgery can be stressful. But the more you do, the more you get used to doing surgery, and then things just kind of fall into place. So it's really just, you got to get experience, and the more surgeries you do, the more comfortable you are.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
But moving on, I think a huge thing I would say you really got established in Toledo. It's been about 15 years. You've been raising your family, or 12 to 15 years, raising your family. And life was pretty good. Wouldn't you say? We had
yeah,
everything.
we had the perfect family and the perfect life, and then my son Brian, when he was 18, he got into a car accident. He was drinking and driving and hit a tree head on, and he died that night, and that kind of changed our life. It
So
changed everybody's lives.
Brian was a senior in high school. He was 18 years old. He turned 18 actually like a month and a couple of days before. But he had transferred to Ottawa Hills for his senior year of high school from another local high school. But yeah, he was just at a party with some friends, and he was actually they actually had a DD that night, but a lot of
Designated driver, yeah.
but things happened, and then someone else stuff was going on. He ended up leaving, but yeah, unfortunately, out of so many people that have probably driven drunk, and you never know. One choice, Brian was known as he'd make a lot of good choices in his life. He was a straight A student. He was on the Division I golf, or he was on the not the, he was Division I at St. John's.
Right.
He was on the varsity golf team for Ottawa Hills. He was the
Yeah.
second player.
He's a good golfer. He was almost scratched, not quite, but
Yeah, but he made a lot of good choice. He made all the right choices, honestly, except that he made a bad decision that night. And you can't really make it when you're drinking
right.
alcohol.
You can't make good decisions when you're drunk. So,
but I think that's kind of shaped the last 10 plus years of all of our life after a tragedy.
Yeah,
like
because
that.
when Brian died, I just couldn't. You could do one thing. You could do is you could just say that Brian died and you bury him, and that's the end of it, and you don't do anything about it. But there's no reason somebody like him should die the way he did, drunk driving. It's such a preventable thing, and so we knew that we had to do something with it, and we we went to the local media because there was a lot of things being talked about how drunk he was, and we're bad parents and all kind of things. He was on the news and they're talking about how his alcohol level was so high, and I just had to set the record straight. So we went to our local news and did an interview and really kind of talked about Brian and his life. And yeah, he made a mistake. He was the drunk driver, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn from his mistake. And we've really taken that stance. And we got onto Facebook, which was social media at that time, and got in the news, and it just took off. I don't know what it was about Brian, but something that the nation and even the world was intrigued by what happened to him, and our point to try to stop drunk driving. But we were on the Katie Couric show and a lot of other talk shows, and then we started Brian Matters, which was a foundation we started to help educate about drunk driving. And my wife and I and Kevin talks now, and my daughter Christy will go to high schools and talk about drinking and driving and the dangers and how to prevent it. And I think we don't really try to tell kids not to drink. I mean, we're not out there telling people what to do. We're just trying to educate them about the dangers of drinking and especially driving. And we use Brian as the example, and we show our wonderful life that we used to have and all the accomplishments that Brian had, and how that all disappeared after he died.
Yeah, and to jump in here too, like the
Yeah.
one thing that I think something that resonates is how open you guys are about it. And I mean, you guys are both doctors, and I remember you guys always were very strict about not drinking,
Yeah.
making smart decisions. So you guys always communicated that. So it's not as if you guys didn't do that. Everyone can easily point the finger when it happens to someone else, but I think it was your willingness to open up your life so much to potentially save at least one other. I know you guys used to say that just if you can save by talking, and it was uncomfortable for you guys.
Well, it's not
especially at
easy
the
to sit up
start.
there and talk about your son, drinking and driving, and thank God he didn't kill anybody else other than himself. But a lot of patients, I mean, a lot of parents would want to bury that probably, because it's embarrassing. And I was never embarrassed by it. It's life, and Brian was a good kid. He just made a bad decision, like a lot of kids do, and so there's not anything embarrassing about it. It's just we should use it to help other people.
And one decision doesn't define you. A lifetime of him, everyone. I think that's something else that was with Brian at the funeral home when he was the showings. They had the most showings they've ever had of people who came through. There's so many outpouring of just people who only barely ever interacted with Brian, but they had positive experiences about him. So he had a special light inside him, and he's not defined by one bad decision.
Well, in his story, I mean, you can look it up. I mean, when this first happened, we wrote a letter to the graduating class of 2013. That's the year he died, because Brian never graduated high school because he died before he graduated. And we realized how people were really listening, because I mean, this letter was shared like 220,000 times on Facebook, which it reached like 24 million people around the world, and 20, 30,000 comments came in, and that's when we really knew that it mattered to people, and parents would read this letter to their kids. And I remember a hairdresser, everybody who came in for prom, the hairdresser would make them read the letter before they went out to prom, and just things like that. And it's kind of stuck through the years. But then when Kevin started the social media with us, we've done some of that work about drinking and stuff like that. And those are some of our biggest TikToks that are watched, are the ones that talk about education about alcohol and the
Yeah, and I
dangers of
think
alcohol.
when you used to do that, you barely even knew how to use Facebook. You
No,
just
I didn't know.
managed to get it on there, and it just was going viral.
Yeah, it
And
just
he
went
never,
viral. Yeah.
he got on all. They were on the Katie Couric. They were on national television. I was on for a
Yeah.
second with you guys, but
But that's what I'm
that
saying. There was something about Brian and his story that people resonated with him more than
yeah.
other people. I don't know
Well, I
why.
know, and I think just how you put it and your willingness to be open and share uncomfortable things like that, but you weren't optimizing anything. It went so I always think about that, and then we never had a social media strategy after that, and then
Mm,
we only recently once last year when we started doing that, we're like, let's incorporate this other stuff. See, and it does. It all resonates. I think the combination of a lot of things, but and I think it's very meaningful to us, and if it helps other people, we get messages sometimes from people that say it's made a big difference to them,
yeah.
and that's always, it keeps you going wanting to do that.
Even like I think one of the most recent ones we did a video on. Oh, I actually read the letter. So the letter I was talking about this year is the first time I ever did it. I read the letter on social media instead of sending the letter out by letter. But I talked it and I spoke to the people, and somebody had watched it. And he wrote a comment and he said that I watched the pain in your eyes as you were reading this letter, and I could see the pain as a father losing a son, how bad it was. And he said that I realized I could never do that to my father. And he said, I just want you to know that you saved a life, at least one life tonight, because I was getting ready to kill myself. And after I watched this, he said, I could never do that to my dad, cause the pain that you're going through. And it's stuff like that. There's no monetary, amount you can put
Yeah, I
on that.
mean,
That's like,
that's
and so we get a lot of comments about how this has really affected people, and parents will contact us about how it's changed their child's life and viewpoint on alcohol. But so, anyways, that's something we're ongoing. We're going to
yeah.
continue to do that in the future and talk a little bit about stuff like that.
We'll definitely, yeah, we'll definitely do deep dives, talk about more stuff like that, because there's a lot from the talks we give that we can incorporate. One last thing I would want to touch on is, what was it, the year after Brian died, with all that going on, Brian Mathers, you guys started a couple months after you guys started the golf tournament,
Yeah.
foundation, everything, but a year after, I think in a huge part is you wrote the book, your only book
Well, yeah.
about
So
Brian.
I wrote, so about a month after Brian died, I just couldn't. It was actually before a month. I just couldn't sleep at night, so I get on my cell phone and I started writing a book. And I mean, I just swear to God, I just woke up one night and I knew exactly the title of the book, what I wanted to write in the book, every chapter I knew, and I wrote it all down really quickly, the outline. And then every night I'd get up, and within a month, every night I would write. And within a month or two, I had the whole book written. And then from that point, then I got somebody to edit it and do the grammar for me and stuff like that. And then I self-published it. So it's been a pretty meaningful book. I mean, we give it out to high schools, and it's been on the internet. I mean,
Yeah.
it's sold a lot of copies, but that was just something I could never rewrite that book. It's very raw and emotional, and you'll cry if you read it. Definitely the first couple chapters, but
It's pretty quick. You can read it in a couple, like 2 to
yeah,
4
probably three or
hours,
3 hours you can. Yeah,
4 hours. But so many. I mean, a couple schools have read it, and then we've spoken at those schools. School in Texas, a school
yeah.
in Ohio, um,
In Tennessee, we just had them
Tennessee.
read the book.
But the book is called "The Night He Died: Turning Tragedy into Hope," and I think it's a combination of Brian, your life's a neurosurgeon, part of your life story,
Yeah.
and kind of just advocacy and trying to raise
Yeah.
awareness. So
It's really kind of we describe exactly what happened that night, and everything that led up to it, and all the aftermath after he died, and what we went through as a family and how horrible it was. And then we talk about what we started doing on social media and alcohol, and we tried to
yeah.
change the laws. My wife and I went down to Columbus and talked to senators and lawmakers about changing law about certain things. So there's a lot of stuff in the book.
Yeah, and I think with the book too. Oh, sorry. It's you can find it on brianmatters.com. That's our website. You can buy it there. It's currently not on Amazon, where so when you published it, it was just a small time
Yeah.
publisher, and during after late last year, the publisher is a small time publisher, and COVID was really hard for the publishing business. So he actually closed down his shop. So we're currently in the process of looking for a new
Yeah.
publisher. If
So if anybody
anyone,
knows a publisher, really new publisher for our book, so we have some copies at home that we still have
yeah,
that
we
we
still
can.
have we have. I mean, we still have hundreds and hundreds of copies,
Yeah.
and we fulfill our own orders. But it's really just just about spreading awareness. You can see a lot of stuff. We have some articles and other things on Brian
Right.
Matters, and speak to a lot of schools. And uh, it's just like he said. It's about if you can save one person at a time.
Yeah.
The power of one person surviving has ripple effects throughout the world. But I think that's a good introductory episode.
Well, and then I
If you have
think
anything else.
yeah, I mean, so that's part of what we want to do, and then I think the other thing is this is our lifestyle. I mean, I think as a family we've always been pretty healthy, and then I know after Brian died, I don't know, Kevin can speak for himself. I mean, for me, it's like Brian lost all this opportunity to do things that he can never do again, and I was thinking I wanted to try to do something challenging, and I've always been active, and so I started um, running, and then I did a half marathon and then a marathon, and I decided I wanted to do an Ironman, and so I spent years, probably 2 or 3 years, in all
Well,
this
let's if
training.
you want to talk, let's slow down. Let's tell people what each one is. So you started off with
Oh, okay.
the Disney marathon, right?
Well, first I started off just doing some small runs, right? So I just started doing 5Ks and 10Ks, which are smaller runs, and then I moved up to a half marathon, which is
13.1 miles.
13.1 miles. Then I wanted to try a marathon, so then I trained for the marathon, and I got a plan offline, and I just did what they told me to do every day, and then I did the Disney marathon, and the kids and my wife came down with me.
And that
That was
was
fun.
the beginning of 2017. I remember it was when I was a sophomore at Ohio State. So you did the Disney and it was super cold that morning. I remember.
Yeah, it was freezing. We had to get up like at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then you sit out there waiting for hours to start
Yeah.
it. But then after that, I thought I'd try a triathlon. So then they have, there's different triathlons. There's a sprint, an Olympic, a
And
half,
just
and a full.
triathlon is
Yeah,
you swim first, then you bike,
yeah,
then you run.
yeah.
So
So I when I started doing this, actually, I had asked Kevin, "Do you want to think about doing an Ironman with me?" And he was in college at Ohio State and busy, and I don't think he had the time. And so I just
it
started.
was completely different to me too. You jumped into that, and I
No, I
think
know.
it's no. I'm not saying it like that. I'm saying it's really cool, but it's the world of the unknown before you do it. Now I love I
Yeah,
run in marathons and I do triathlons too. But I remember when you first said it to me, I was super busy and it was just easy not to. And
yeah,
thinking about it, it seems very weird. I've never
yeah.
who swam, biked, and ran before.
So then so I did a few of the small ones first, and then I did a half Ironman, and then ultimately I did the full Ironman, which is 2.4 miles of swimming, so almost 2.5 miles of swimming, and then you hop onto your bike for 112 miles, and then you get off your bike and you run a full marathon, and that's what an Ironman is. And we started like at 7 in the morning, right at sunrise, and I finished at 9:25 or something, so it was like 14 hours and 25 minutes, and that's like an average time. I mean, that's not great, it's
But
not horrible, but
it's more so about just doing
yeah,
it because it's not about just the day. I think a
yeah,
lot of people, it's not just about the day of the race. You show up on the day of the race and you're cashing in all of the training you've done
yeah.
because that's what I always think. I would think about that is if someone says they're too busy to do something, you were in full practice as a
Full practice, full
neurosurgeon
trauma call. I
and
mean,
you dedicated your life.
no
That was
matter when I got home, whether it was at 5 or 8 o'clock at night, whatever I had to do that day, I went out and did it, no matter how long it took. And weekends I was off, I would just run and ride. I could never. I don't know if I could ever do that again, but it's a big time commitment. But the point of it is, I just wanted to challenge myself. But in the process, I got really healthy eating and exercising. And my wife, she's really into health. She's tried so many different health programs, but she's actually, I think she did her nutritionist. She
she's
got
got a nutrition
Yep. And
certification.
my wife could talk to you guys about macros and micros and all that kind of stuff. But then I kind of died out of that stuff and got busy again. And then Kevin took over. Then Kevin got into health and fitness really big. And now he's doing the triathlons and
Well, I mean,
marathons. And
but
so,
that's not solely true. Like I did a little stuff before, but you're not. He's not out of the race. We both
no,
just did an Olympic triathlon. We did the Toledo Olympic triathlon.
yeah,
Yes. And one other thing I wanted to shout out here is his coach when he was doing the triathlon training, and she's coaching me now. I'm doing the Chattanooga Ironman, my first one in a couple months. Is Renee Small here in
yeah.
or is Renee Small or
Yeah,
Simon?
I think it's small.
I think it's Renee Small. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's in Toledo, the greater Toledo, Ohio area. If you ever, or it's probably, I think she does online coaching too,
Yeah,
anywhere. But if
she and
she's a
her husband
great
have done a
coach.
lot of Ironmans, and they're very active constantly.
But if
It's a way of life.
we were just talking to her yesterday. But if anyone ever wants to jump into triathlon, I think hit her up. She's got, I think it's multi-sport, but
Yeah.
she's a great person.
But I mean, so that I think, we really always wanted as a family to get into fitness and advocate fitness and talk about healthy eating. And my wife was a vegan for a year, and I was a vegan for like 6 months, and it's a lot of work. It's great food. Some of the best meals she makes are vegan, and we've tried, pescatarian, which is just fish, or is it no fish? I
It's,
forget.
you can have, the only meat you can have is
Yeah,
fish.
fish, and then vegetarian, and now we're back to just eating
But
healthy and normal wheat meat. But Kevin's kind of a vegetarian now.
yeah, I mean, I eat plant based about like 80% of the time because I kind of, the labels, I think all or nothing on some of these things.
Yeah,
Especially, I just read Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. I read a bunch of stuff. I read the Whole Foods Diet by John Mackey. Started Whole Foods, but I think there's just so many different things. It's such an insanely complex thing. Is diet.
yeah.
Everyone's so personalized, and I think finding what works for you and constantly changing your opinion as new
Yeah.
research comes out. And
But definitely. I mean, over the years that I've been doing this, and Cindy's been reading about it, we've all. I mean, I definitely think plant based. It's definitely heart healthy. It's going to extend your life. There's just no doubt. I think the data supports that completely.
I think just so plant based, and I think just the one thing you can't argue about. You can argue about meat and these other things, but you can't argue that processed food, not eating processed food, is probably the number one thing that I think it's pretty.
Because there's so many chemicals in processed food and things. That's the problem,
Yeah.
And that's
Well, you could be, the problem I've always had. You can be a vegan and sit there and eat Oreos. So,
right.
you know what I'm saying? That's what, and I think it is. It's diet and nutrition, diet, and just exercise can have. As a doctor, I think it's always cool. We put so much emphasis in our, especially in the United States with medicine, on once someone has a problem, trying to fix them, and insurance will pay all this money.
Yeah, instead of being preventative, we wait till they have it and then we fix it. But so I think a big, down the road we're gonna do podcasts definitely on healthy eating and healthy living, and maybe some triathlon stuff. And I'd like to have my wife Cindy on. She'll talk your ear off about health stuff, and she knows all the research.
Yeah, I think there's just tons of stuff beyond just neurosurgery and medicine. We'll definitely have tons of that. We'll have guests. We just did the triathlon with Bob Baxter yesterday. It'd be interesting to talk to a healthcare administrator like him.
Yeah, so Bob's the regional CEO of Mercy Health System, which is a big healthcare system. It's Bon Secours too. It's a big healthcare system in Ohio and like 5 other states. So it was fun to have him doing that. That was his first triathlon. He does a lot of marathons. But yeah, we'd like to have different guests on that are interesting people that maybe you won't meet out on the streets every day, and pick their
also like with the cool thing is, I mean, me and my dad spend a lot of time together, and I think we both have completely different backgrounds. Clearly, like I'm in business, obviously, and I've always done that, entrepreneurial lifestyle. And you in medicine, you can pick someone's brain the way I could never pick someone's brain, and vice versa. So I think that's a really cool thing to be able to do. But basically, we kind of want to talk about anything that's meaningful to us or piques our curiosity, and hopefully you guys enjoy. And we want to obviously keep anything you guys are interested in.
We'll definitely the comments. I mean, if you have certain topics that you think we could cover, realistically, we'd be happy to talk about it. Can't talk way outside what we know, but the stuff that we do know, we can talk about.
And one thing there I would say is we read a lot of the comments between my dad, myself, my mother, and our other family members. We read as many comments as we can. We try to reply. One thing is, same with the direct messages people send to us as well. One issue is, and I think we get this a ton, my dad can't answer because of how the United States medical and legal system are. You can't answer when people ask you for treatment. You can't prescribe.
I can't really give you advice. I'd have to see you as a patient in my office to actually give you any advice. So I just can't give out advice on social media. I mean, as much as I'd like to.
Personalized advice. So, I mean, that's why we can give general situations, and we try to create a lot of.
We can talk about topics. I just can't talk about. I can't if you ask me a question about your particular health problem, I can't really answer that for you.
Yeah, I just wanted
I
to
can just
address
give
that.
you general ideas.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I just wanted to address that quick because if you think we're ignoring you, we're not. We read so many of these messages. We look through every single one, but the problem is we can't do anything. We can't provide treatment options. Can't say anything.
can't provide medical advice
Yeah.
specifically for you. That's all.
So yeah. But we're excited. This was episode number
Yeah,
1.
it's got to be a one. This was it.
Yeah. This is the first one. Bear with us. We did our best
Yeah.
to make it sound and look good, and we'll try to keep going and keep improving as we go.
All right, thanks.
All right, peace out, everyone. Have a good one.